Doc Brown, this is Marty McFly, man. It's good to see you. I mean, come on. How many times have you heard that?
Oh man, awesome. I mean, I hear it all the time.
Okay.
Hey, but I love the movies.
Me too. Me too. I do. And so, okay, my name. This is one thing I mean, at least like yours, like Back to the Future was an iconic movie growing up, right, in the 80s. And then, so that's kind of cool. So like, I always get, because I think I'm like one of the only guys left who has the name Larry under the age of 70. Everyone's like, oh, how's Mo and Curly? I'm like, oh, it's hilarious. I've never heard that. Another one I hear is, how are your two brother Daryls? And I'm like, yeah, I've never heard that. I hear that all the time. And then Hagner, like, oh, like JR from Dallas. Right.
Okay. I was thinking Larry, the boxer.
Oh yeah, the Hagler. Yeah, well, I'll take that one. I'll take that one. That's better. So, well, it's good to have you on, man.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm so excited to have you on. So I know we'll just level set here real quick. I think you have 1, 2, 3. Carry the 4, 8.
That's right.
8 kids.
8 wonderful young people.
My gosh.
All young adults now.
Yeah. So what is the age spread?
21 to 34.
Okay. So, wow. So so basically your wife was pregnant for like a decade and a half.
Exactly.
So I have 4 and, when I've told people, when I tell people in the past, like you always get the, like, I always say this and I'm really curious to hear what your answer is. So like, I always joke that when we had 3, everyone was like, wow, right? But when you have 4, they're like, wow. Like, it's a very different wow. So I can only imagine, like, over the years, what have been the responses of, like, I have 8?
Well, when I say 8, to people who have lots of children or people who have come from large families, they're not surprised at all. They recognize that the larger the family gets, the more everybody takes care of everybody.
Yeah.
People that have a smaller family will often go, wow, because, when we had 2 children, when we had 3 children, even up to 4, that was challenging because they're all vying for hands to hold and attention. And the more we had, the more love, the unlimited love you have for each of them, but they also have unlimited love for each other. So it was just a matter of them, we live in a big home. And people would come to our home and expect it to be chaotic and just things everywhere. And they were always shocked how orderly things were because our children would play in a group. I mean, they moved from room to room to room together. And then, if ever we hear something crash and fall, everybody goes to check it. We're the last to go check it out. They go check it out and they'll say, Mom, Dad, everything's fine. So, a larger family has its benefits, and I think oftentimes, unless you're from a large family or have a large family of your own, there's some things that people don't get.
I agree with that. I was just talking to a client today, and he has a 10-month-old, and I said, I was like, I don't want to put any like pressure on you. I'm just curious. I was like, are you guys talking about another one? And he just was like, don't even put that out in the universe, man. Like, don't even say it out loud. Like, he was like terrified. He's like, I don't know how you do 4. And I was like, to be honest, like, I remember what it was like having 1. And
exactly.
But I wouldn't change it. In fact, now it's actually the opposite for me. Like, and I never thought I'd really say this. My oldest is 17, my youngest is 7. And a lot like you, I embrace the busyness and the loudness and the energy and the chaos. It's actually when it's quiet that it creeps me out.
Exactly. Something's going on. Something's going on.
Something's not right. In fact,
right.
yeah. So, well, I'm curious, growing up, did you ever think that your family would be, because I know your background and your childhood, there was a lot going on there, but did you ever think that you'd have 8?
I did not. In fact, I never thought too much of being a dad, even though,
right.
I mean, I love my dad. My dad loved me. But I kind of skipped right over that because my relationship was my strongest relationship was with my grandfather. So my grandfather was a guy that when things happened in my life, regardless of how bad, I would say, I got to tell him as opposed to I can't tell him. That's the kind of relationship we had. So I kind of always thought about just being a man like my grandfather, not necessarily being a grandfather or a father for that matter. And my trajectory early on wasn't wasn't relationship focused, so to speak. I was kind of focused on, academics. I was focused on wrestling and martial arts and boxing and all the things that kind of kept me out of some of the trouble that was lurking in my community. So it wasn't until college that I actually started having a really keen interest in women. And, a few had a keen interest in me. So that's when I actually started thinking about family and what it would be like, and, what it would be like being a father and a husband and even a granddad.
Wow, man. I just want to give you like a virtual hug right now. You and I have crazy amounts in common already. My grandfather, like you, was my father figure. My childhood was kind of like this revolving door of just sort of toxic men that came in and out. And actually didn't even meet my biological father until I was 30, which was kind of crazy. But my grandfather played a key role. And same thing. Like, I was into martial arts. I was into wrestling. It really helped me stay focused. But yeah, I didn't expect to ask you this, but I'd really like to know, because I think there's an element of, you said something there that I think every dad would love for his son or daughter to say. It wasn't that I was afraid to tell him, I got to tell him. And that's really like creating this environment of psychological safety where you can have a go-to, where you're not going to be, blasted with shame and blame and pain and, what's wrong with you? Why did you do that? Or what? So what was it about your grandfather that made you feel safe, that like, man, this is my guy. This is who I go to?
Yeah, I think he thought of our relationship as so much more than just a biological connection. It was just deeper than the relationship from kinship. He actually took ownership in my life. And when I became a dad, one of the things that he said to me that helped me understand how he was, at least with my mom, was he said, you're bringing a child into this world, and that's a big deal. But it's an even bigger deal for you to be with that child throughout this world. Wow. That summed it up for me. That summed it up. Oftentimes as dads, we're talking about, we bring children in the world and we're going to be the dad. But bringing them into the world and being with them throughout this world, unconditional love and support, guidance, being a mentor, being the shoulder to lean on, and being there in tough times. And really in the toughest of times is when it matters most.
Yeah.
So those are the things that my grandfather did for me. He was that guy that if I took something to him, I knew he had a saying that there was nothing I could ever do to make him stop loving me. And my children know the same thing. However, I knew I could disappoint him, but I also knew he had my back.
Yeah.
So that relationship is what I often encourage my clients to embrace. That's what you want. You want to start off with your child with not being judgmental, with not be overreacting as opposed to reflecting. Because we have a lot of parents today that are still healing, and it's not until we heal the broken child in us, that we can actually prevent a broken child from coming from us. So I tell parents all the time, you want that relationship where that child says, I got to tell mom and dad, as opposed to I can't. In this world, relying on their peers can be extremely dangerous because their peers know as much or less than they do. So yeah, my granddad just laid it out like that. And he didn't just say it, I saw it. There were times when I had been in fights, and he told me that, once I could really control my emotions, I could control the world. So we were working on that together on the perimeters. My grandfather was a farmer. And much of the time, so in the city, I grew up in the inner city, but when I got in trouble, I went to the farm. And it got to a point where I actually wanted to live on the farm. He told me I was his best helper until I told him I wanted to quit school, and then he told me I sucked. So
very strategic.
So he showed me. There were times where I said things and I did things that I was disappointed of after the fact, and he would stand there and look at me, and I could see the disappointment, but then he would say, okay, now what? That was his thing, now what? And now I tell children the same thing. Before you do it, say, and then what? Like, what next? So start thinking about the consequences of your behavior. And that was my and he only had a 3rd grade farm school education. So like all the grade levels were in one room. But to this day, he's the wisest man I ever met. And I've met, I've hung out with the late General Colin Powell, or Secretary of State. I've hung out for almost a year with him. And I thought he was one of the most incredible people I've ever met. But to this day, my granddad, just outranks them all.
I mean, he sounds like an incredible individual. In fact, your granddad and mine probably could have hung out and been, thick as thieves. My grandpa, he had a 6th grade education, and that was it. But one of the wisest men that I knew, and he was my go-to as well. That's just such a really cool place to start, man. Because I think that's a huge miss on parents, right? Because you're right. There's a danger that if the kids don't have that go-to at home, they're going to go to their peers. And some of the things that, I mean, we don't have to be blind, to see, like, we look around and we're like, wow, like there's some craziness.
You said the least of our worries. I mean, peers. What about drugs? What about gangs?
Yep.
So there's all these things out here that will affirm their negative decisions. And, we have to have a relationship with our children, and it starts at the young age. I can't tell you how many times my wife and I would sit at the dinner table with our kids, and they would talk about things, and some of the things were unsettling, what they saw, what one of their friends were doing, and how we would sit there at the dinner table and not interrupt. Sometimes we'd hit each other under the table, but we wouldn't interrupt because our reaction was going to stop everything. Later, we could talk about it in the bedroom, about then how we're going to actually, talk to them about it. But the reaction, parental and guardian reaction, is everything. It's not the behavior as much as it is, or the child's behavior as much as it is our reaction to it. And then where's our reaction coming from? Is our reaction... Right. Exactly. Yeah. Or how we were treated as children. Mm-hmm.
Right.
Maybe, when a child talks back, what does that mean? Disrespectful, defiant? Or does it mean that you're not being heard like you were when you were a child? Mm-hmm. I can't tell you how many parents there are that haven't healed before becoming parents. And, and that's not something that we all say that we have to do. Most of us don't know that we should do that.
You're hitting upon so many different points there, which is this, responsiveness that we have, or the reaction that we have to something going on in our kids' lives or whatever else, and not interrupting. Well, I've heard you say a couple of times, that it's so important for us to heal. And, I think we've actually have gotten better over the years. Is like, I remember, Dr. Brown, do you mind me asking how old you are?
Yeah. I'm going to tell you what I classically tell everyone else.
Okay.
AARP member.
Okay. So I'll tell you I'm 48. So, I'm
not quite. You're not a member yet.
I'm not. I'm getting some of the preview mailings though.
Exactly.
And I'm like,
exactly.
I think I should change my identity. When those come in, I'm like, I'm not ready for that. But no. So, I appreciate that, because I think the way that we were brought up, I remember growing up that if it was even found out that your parent, like I'm talking like when I was in grade school, if your parents were in counseling, you guys are broken, your family, you guys are just in the funny farm. Like that's kind of like how we were identified. And then if we needed counseling as kids, oh man, you were just targeted for all kinds of stuff. Now it's, I think society is more embraced, like, hey, don't go at life alone. Counseling is not necessarily a bad thing. Self-healing is not a bad thing. But I still think there's a little bit of taboo about it. But I think one of the biggest question marks is, well, where do I start with that? And what advice do you have when it comes to just healing our own stuff as parents?
Well, I believe that everybody carries an invisible backpack, an invisible second backpack. There's one that we carry that we don't mind people seeing. But then there's one that we all carry. It's kind of like you might have a friend or two of 30 or 40 years. but that friend still doesn't know everything there is to know about you, because there's some things in your backpack that you don't even want to know about again.
Right.
So everybody has that. And I tell people, we're only as sick as our secrets. It doesn't mean you go out and blab your secrets to people. You have to know what you're carrying. Otherwise, you bleed on people who didn't cut you. And that's what's going on in society right now. Everybody carries a backpack. So instead of saying what's wrong with this person, what's wrong with that family, what we could be saying is, I wonder what they're carrying that I know nothing about. So
is there a book on this?
Yes, I wrote a book on this.
Just kidding.
It is.
Right. It's right there.
It's right there.
Yeah, it's in my notes too.
It's called Two Backpacks.
Yeah.
But the point is, I wasn't interviewed on this book. This book comes from years of research, but I wasn't interviewed on it heavily until the pandemic, because everybody started realizing that there's actually some truth to this, that we all have different levels in our backpack. Just because we don't look like what we've been through doesn't mean that many of us aren't in a storm, coming out of a storm, or about to go into one. So my thing for parents I would say you can't heal what you don't reveal. And what I mean when I say that is that whatever we're carrying gets served to others. The pandemic to date, was the one thing that happened to everyone at the same time all over the world.
True.
It went in the repercussions, implications went into people's backpack. So if your backpack was already full, guess what happened? Just the law of gravity. It came out. So these videos that go viral of restaurant workers shooting at customers, people fighting at a drop of a dime. All of this goes back to this interpersonal stuff that everybody carries. And when you don't deal with it, it deals with us. So, and it's probably more important, in my opinion, when it comes to parenting, because otherwise we don't break the cycle of the trauma. We help it to be recapitulated.
That makes so much sense. And, I love the two backpacks, the one that we show and the one that we don't. When it comes to our kids and helping them through things, what do you think is the biggest thing that actually stands in our way when it comes to, dealing with our own traumas, dealing with our own stuff in our backpack, and, trying to be the best for them? Because I almost look at parenting like a juggling act, where you kind of I have my stuff over here that I have to deal with, but I have their stuff over here, and I'm just kind of doing this, and it's just and it just feels very confusing sometimes to even
That's a great analogy.
Yeah, just to separate the two worlds for even a moment, and just really understand.
So that juggling.
Yeah.
So as you're juggling with parenting and other things, think of the other things kind of like a rubber ball. Like if I miss these other things like work or other responsibilities, someone can actually catch that.
I don't call this the dad edge for anything.
What's happening, man?
Did you lose your tooth? Oh my gosh, it's almost out.
What's happening?
He's saying, "What's up? How are you?
What's
you want
up?
To say hello?
I'm sending love.
Here, I'm gonna give you the mic. I'm just gonna have him say hello.
Yes.
This is Dr. Brown. Here, you can say hello. No, get on the microphone.
Hello.
Hello. How are you?
Good.
It's great to see you. I'd rather spend this time with you.
You want to tell him your name?
Colton.
Colton?
Yeah.
What a wonderful name for an awesome young man.
You want to have some fun? Say, can you drive 88 miles an hour?
Can you drive at 88 miles per hour?
I can, but I don't do it anymore. I'll have to share that story at a later date.
Thanks for showing me your ugly tooth. Oh my gosh. Okay, so all my kids at some point in time have bombed my podcast, which I kind of clearly welcome, right?
That's right.
But that's Colton's first time. Colton has never come in here during an interview and has gotten on the mic.
He felt the energy.
He did. He did. So cool. I'm so sorry. I don't remember exactly where we left off.
So you're saying a juggling act.
Yeah.
So as parents, I would want parents to think of all those other competing responsibilities to parenting as a rubber ball in the juggling act. When it comes to parents, think of it as a glass ball. You can't drop that one.
Yeah. Good.
So there's the difference. The difference is if I have a choice in what has to go, it's going to be job related. It's going to be something outside of my home that's related. Because guess what? I have a great team that works with me, and I can delegate well. This ball, not so much.
Yeah. That's a really good analogy, and one that I think really, really hits home. It's the glass one that can't give, right?
That's right. That's right.
It is. But do you think, I don't think any parent wants to break it, right? We don't want to shatter it. But do you think that we allow certain like chips, maybe fractures to happen that go maybe unnoticed?
Well, I think the fact of the matter is we're all broken. You know, I think one of the most eye-opening things that ever happened to me was when I went to graduate school to study clinical psychology. Here I'm thinking people talk to me all their life, you know, and I've kind of got this reputation of being the guy that listens well and can help. So I'm in my first course. The professor comes in, there are 9 students, and he says, "Welcome to the wonderful world of clinical psychology. It's obvious you're broken." And every course that I had from that point on was taught from that perspective, not
Really?
where it's going to be us and them, those we treat. It actually was me, we. So it didn't allow us to have a judgmental or pejorative attitude toward those who needed help. So society already has that. Imagine if that was reinforced in our training. And prior to graduating, I had to choose a modality of psychotherapy that I wanted to practice. I chose psychoanalytic psychotherapy, the couch stuff. However, before I could even get training in it, I had to undergo it for a year.
What was that like?
Oh my gosh. It was one of the best things I ever did. And I didn't realize that I also had that, I grew up not, I'm older than you, but, not too much. And I grew up in that same era where if you needed help for your problems, the worst thing the best thing that you could do was go to church and talk to your pastor, not realizing that your pastor doesn't have any training in mental health. So, and if you needed to talk to anyone else, there was something really seriously wrong with you.
100%.
Exactly. So I didn't even realize that I had brought that to the profession, and now I'm on the couch. And I'm realizing that there's so much that I didn't realize. One of the things, you had asked something about what parents can do better for our children, and what we can do better as human beings is we can show up authentically, show up as our authentic selves. Now, guess what? Not everybody's going to get 100% of it. It's kind of like a dimmer switch. Depending on who you are, I'm going to give it to you, but I may not turn it up to 100. And many of us don't because of various issues. And some of those issues are projections based on what we think others are going to think or feel. But one of the things that I learned that, I thought I had I had some traumas in my life, and I'm thinking, I'm good. I found out in my very first year, the first year was mandatory. I stayed in it indefinitely. But I found out that it was possible that I was using achievement as my coping strategy.
I think that seems to be, for someone who's a high achiever. I've done, 1,100 episodes now on this podcast, and you can always, every time I hear, where the person came from, there's always some sort of, I wouldn't say always because I don't want to globalize it, but a good amount that person had some sort of trauma that happened to them. I mean, I know you lost your brother when you were 11.
Exactly. My brother was murdered. That was I was angry at the world.
Right.
And actually, I don't think anger, because I kind of know what that looks like now. I was probably enraged. And let me tell you what my grandfather said. And he didn't have any mental health background. He said this. He said, "Son, you don't love life enough to fear death." And that was right. I was putting myself in harm's way. I didn't care. I mean, I was living so with reckless abandonment that, I just like whatever happens is what happens. And he said that to me, and it was his mission to make sure that I connected to something in life. So that's where the boxing and the martial arts and the wrestling and track and field, he wanted me to experience success. And he was right on the money. He didn't call it self-efficacy, but that's what we call it.
Yeah, I love the fact that your grandfather steered you in a direction of doing something positive. Because I think when we're put in that, when something like that happens to us, and you even mentioned the word enraged, there's two paths we're going to go down. One is the one that maybe your grandfather encouraged you and hoped you would go down, and you did. And then the other one is that's not going to be a good turnout.
And I was on that path.
Yeah.
I was on that path. Actually, I was on that path with a first cousin, sons of two sisters. And long story short, he went away. He went to prison for 24 and a half years.
Wow.
He wouldn't get off the path. And my wife and I picked him up almost 2 years now, February 2nd. And after 24 and a half years, and for 15 of those years that he was away, Larry, I trained him to work with me. He works with me now. We grew,
no way.
We were more like brothers than first cousins.
Wow.
But he was on that path. And our grandfather told us, he said, at the end of that path is going to be something that you don't want. And guess what I realized? I realized that granddad had never told me something that was untrue. Mm-hmm. My cousin is now extremely effective talking to young people that are on the fence and can go in that direction that he went. Because
right.
he tells them that he was the kid that said, it can't happen to me. And I said, it can happen. And it wasn't just bad things. Cousin, you could be president of the United States if you want to. My cousin was a state champion wrestler, had a scholarship to Virginia Tech. So, I mean, he could have had it. He had it all. So now he says, when you say it can't happen to you, it can. Either way, and everything in between can. Every decision has a future.
So I have an interesting question for you, and I think that your perspective is extremely unique. So you had the experience that you did growing up, right? And then you mentioned on the fence. Like, I love that term. Like, I could go either side of this fence. I could easily
right.
Fall or climb or whatever I want to do, right? So there you are as a kid. You have this amazing grandfather in your life who is this incredible encouragement for you, incredible guide for you, and a safe person for you to go to in time of need. So there's you growing up. Now, fast forward, you have all of this life experience. You've learned all these things through academia and also through experience. And the question that I have for you is that we have a lot of men who listen to this show. And I would say a lot of guys who are dealing with teenagers of like, I don't know how to get through. Like, it's like Larry, like Dr. Brown. I'm struggling to get through. Like, how do I be like Doc Brown's grandfather, who's that guy who could get through? And so through all your education and your experience growing up, what would you say to men that are just like, man, help me just get through to this kid?
Well, you know what? I was just texting the son that's still home. I just got back from school. I'm texting him to come down because I want him to share.
No way.
Oh, yeah. He's actually probably more like me than any of my kids. God saved the youngest for the most challenges. Here he comes.
You know, so crazy. This is crazy because Colton is my youngest, and he made an appearance, and now yours is. What's his name?
Jordan.
What's up, Jordan?
Hey,
how are you?
Okay.
Good.
So with Jordan, when I say that Jordan is more like me, Jordan is extremely confident. Jordan did exactly what parents think they want. We want to raise them to be independent and autonomous, but then we don't want to accept it. So that's Jordan. Jordan is when I tell you that my mom used to say that she wore her knees out when I was coming up, and that meant in her words, she was praying a whole lot
Praying
for
for
me.
you.
This is the one, you know, and would be great at whatever he does in life, but he's got more distractions than I ever had.
Yeah.
More distractions. I mean, Jordan is like super intelligent, right? So he goes to school back in the day when he was in high school. Kids picking on him because he was smart. Taking his cell phone and you know, the gangs, you know, teasing him. So guess what? Jordan's number 2 in the world, full contact kickboxing. Nobody in the school, nobody in the school knew that, but he's number 2. So guess what happened? Jordan defends himself. Now the whole gang posse is trying to beat up on him. They found out where he lived. They come to our home. So now, Larry, I'm a father, and I'm a protective father. Mm-hmm. And I can say this to any man out there that knows history. There have been a many of war that has started from someone coming to someone's castle.
100%.
So I got to tell you, Larry, that my biggest challenge, not only with being his dad, but also being a dad, has been some of the situations he's been involved in. Because I literally wanted to handle some things in ways that I knew it would get their attention. You know, I don't believe you can't teach anyone anything until you get their attention.
Oh yeah.
However, what would that have meant for me as a husband? You know, what would my wife, and for Jordan and his siblings? So when I want to tell every father out there that the rough passages are the time that you have to just bear down and go through it with them, not give up on them. Jordan and I, if it's out there to have been to go through, you think we've been through it? Yes. So the point is that you got to stay there and you got to be there, and then you'll start getting messages like, "Hey, Dad, I'm reading Revelations and this doesn't make sense. Explain that to me." Or, "Hey, Dad, hoping you have a great day." You know, or I sent him something the other day, and he said, "I love that. Thank you for sending it." I mean, you know, can you see it?
I can see it. Yeah. Yeah. Satan says, "Oh my gosh, my son literally just sent me that exact same thing."
You see
Satan
that, right?
says, "God, yes."
You see that? So
that's crazy.
So what I'm saying is, from the contentiousness that we went through from about 14 to like 18, where he felt like he knew everything, and it might have been okay, Larry, when we were growing up in the 70s, mm-hmm. You know, where when he's got a disagreement with someone, you know, the people aren't afraid to wear a black eye. You know, you got a disagreement with someone, black eye, you fight, you're playing basketball against each other tomorrow. Mm-hmm. Now it's, you know, nobody wants to wear a black eye. They don't get their big sister to come. They go home and they get guns and other things. So right. Fathers, I want to say, now is the time for us to do the same thing that we're asking our children to do. Sit on our hands in anger, use our words for kindness, and just not let our emotions get the worst of us or the best of us. And I say that to mean, I can't tell you what I thought when this young man came to my home. And I wasn't home. And, you know, when, you know, I did the right thing, you know, got law enforcement involved. When the detective came by to talk to me about it, he says, "Dr. Brown, I mean, this is not our concern. You know, have you seen the kid?" And I'm like, "No." He said, "Look at your ring and look at the kid. The kid's 5 feet, you know, not 100 pounds. This kid's got something to prove, and he's been trying to prove it for a long time. This time it's your son. Does that make it right? No. But did I understand exactly how I tell people what's in his backpack? Mm-hmm. You know, I wanted to make him eat his backpack.
Right.
Instead, I said, what's in his backpack as well?"
That is so good.
Jordan's a junior in college.
Junior in college.
Am I sophomore? Sophomore. Excuse me. Sophomore. I'm giving you more.
Yeah. Hey, Jordan, I appreciate you making an appearance, man.
He said he appreciates you for making an appearance.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, you bet.
I love it.
That's so cool, man. That's so cool. My gosh, your youngest and my youngest makes an appearance. Plus, the text I got from my oldest.
So you
yesterday.
see, right? You see, so
yeah.
I can't, Larry. I mean, when that happened, when he came here with a gun to my home.
I can't imagine.
So, here my cousin, was away for 24 and a half years. And he was the first to tell me about my book. and I expected him to say, this is what you're going to do. And he didn't, because my emotions had got the best of me. My wife's home, George. I mean, who does that? We have to be the men that we really want to be. Not talk about it. We got to be about it.
Be about it.
And that was one of the hardest things. Doesn't mean just like yourself with our backgrounds. It doesn't mean the wolf's not in there. The wolf's not dead. We just choose not to feed it.
Mm-hmm.
So that was one of the hardest things I've had to go through with my children as an adult.
Wow. I feel the exact same way you do. I mean, you were raised also, your dad wasn't by a single parent, correct?
Yes. Dad was in and out only. So my dad left after they were married many years. So the running joke is, I think 20 years or so. And he woke up one day and said, I don't want this anymore. So I always say, I wish my dad had waited till I grew up to become a clinical psychologist. I would have helped him with his midlife crisis.
But it sounds like did you guys resolve things?
Oh yeah, definitely.
You did.
You know what? If I've learned anything from my dad he died during the pandemic. He had COVID. Got COVID. But my dad was one of the most authentic people you'd ever want to meet. He was who he was, and he was unapologetically who he was. So my dad would just kind of show up, and that's who he was. So if I needed him, I could call him. He lived in another state. But he could hear something in my voice when we would talk, and the next thing he's ringing my doorbell. So that's who my dad was. My dad is the first to say that he made one of the worst choices of his life. And I want to say that to the dads out there. Let's be cognizant of our language with our children, because more is caught than is taught. He didn't say he made a mistake. He said he made a bad choice. A mistake is what you make on a spelling test in school, or when we used to have to balance our checkbooks and we overdrafted our accounts. That's a mistake. A bad choice is usually something that we plan on doing, but we don't want people to call us on it.
Right.
My dad said he made a bad choice, and he went home to live with his mother and dad. He had all these thoughts, conflicting thoughts about life and things of that nature, very analogous to a midlife crisis. And then about a year and a half later, he came back to my mom, and my mom said, I can't trust that you won't do it again. And that kept them apart.
Wow. Like it's crazy, man. Like how similar your upbringing was with mine. My mom was married 3 times. My mom and biological father got divorced when I was about 9 months old, and he was a kid. He was in his mid-20s at the time, and he actually thought that the choice, right? He's like, I'm actually doing more harm than good here, and I probably should not be a part of this kid's life because it's just causing too much confusion. And then my mom got remarried when I was 4, and I think, he really took that, I think, as an opportunity to be like, I'm giving this kid a chance at a normal life. Like, that was his choice. And then, but I didn't
Larry.
have a relationship with him until I was 30, which was 18 years ago. And here's the interesting thing, and I love this. I say this all the time. The best lessons in life are caught, not taught, right? And, I'm lucky to where, like, by doing this podcast for 8 years, I've learned from much smarter people than me, like you. And I've been able to maybe avoid some mistakes, but I still face plant every day, right? And my older boys will tell me, they're like, man, you're a great dad. I'm like, like, hang on, dude. Please don't give me too much credit. Like, because you're going to grow up and you have your own family and you have your own kids. Be like, what in God's name was dad thinking? And I always tell him, I was like, my hope is that you can give me some grace, because there are some things I've done wrong. And the story I want to share with you here real quick is, so my dad and I were, he's been married for 40 something years to the same woman. I have 2 younger half brothers. They have a great family. We get along great. They, my kids know him as grandpa and grandma and all this good stuff. But they've asked me questions over the years, and I've answered them. And my 15-year-old, he's one of those really kind of quiet, sort of stoic kids. Doesn't really say anything unless he's really been brewing on it, So last year, we're getting ready to go over to his house for Christmas, and he was it was just me and him in the kitchen, and he's like, "Can I ask you something?" And whenever he says that, I'm like, "Oh, he's been thinking about something for a minute," and I'm like, "Yeah, what's up?" And he goes, "We're going over to Grandpa's house." And I was like, "Yeah." He goes, "Do you like going over there?" And I just like smiled because I knew he'd been brewing, man, for a while on this one, right? And I smile. I'm like, "I do." I go, "Why do you ask, Mason?" And he goes, he just kind of took a deep breath, and he gets along great with my dad. And he goes, "I don't know." He's like, sometimes like I'm at that age now where I really think about things, and I think about your life, and you didn't know him for so long, and he left, and then you accidentally ran into him in a coffee shop, and now you guys have a relationship. He's like, "Dad," he goes, "if you were to leave me, I'd never forgive you, ever. In fact, if I would have saw you on this, if you would have left me and I would have ran into you, I probably would have hit you, and I would have told you how much I hated you." And I was like, and I kind of like laughed. I didn't laugh. I was like, yeah, I get that. And you know what? I went through that too. I was like, but you know what? I'm past all that. People make choices. And I said, you know what's interesting though, Mace? I go, I have forgiven that, and I just don't want to think about the past. I want to think about what could be. My dad's 75 years old, and I want to enjoy the time we have. And I said, but you know who I think has it the hardest? And because he knows my childhood, and it was not easy. It was kind of like yours. And he's like, who? And I said, my dad. Mm-hmm. I was like, think about this. Yes. I was like, my dad had to face these decisions, right? I was like, but my dad still shows up to all your football games. Yeah. Like my dad still like we see him, like that guy. Like, do you have any idea? Like probably the strength and the courage that it takes, because every time he sees us, I'm sure that in the back of his mind somewhere, there's got to be like, man, but he still continues to show up. And I was like, that's a lot of strength, man.
That is.
And he's like, he goes, yeah, but I'd still hit you. Right.
Yeah, but I mean, you're so correct. I mean, the hardest thing for my dad to have got to get over was some words that I said to him when I was younger. Mm. And
yeah, tell me.
Yeah, I think I told him that I hated him, and I missed him, and I was hurt. Yeah. And here we are, like I'm in college and we're having a conversation. He brings it up. I'm like, Dad, you know how old I was? But it it hit him to the core. Yeah. And the reason is just what you're saying, is because he knows, that it caused pain. And what father wants their child to experience pain? Yeah. Exactly.
It's like the opposite of what we want.
Exactly. So yeah.
In fact, I think we go to an extreme probably to prevent them from pain. It's like, and they don't. Oh, yeah. You know what I mean?
Well, that's backfired today. We got to stop.
Right.
We got to stop stealing their heart. Some of the kids are being bubble wrapped, and that doesn't serve them.
I agree, and I'm so glad you're actually talking about that topic, because we are now in a society that we're just bombarded with information. I mean, if you wanted parenting help when, 20 years ago, it was a different story. And now there's so much out there that I think what parents are really, really searching for is like, okay, Doc Brown, like really what I want to know is, how do I actually do all of it and do all of it well? So in other words, give my kids the freedom to where they can go out and make their own mistakes, right? But also give them the psychological safety for when things go bad, they're going to come to me, right? And how can I have good conversations with them where they're where we're actually going to have a fruitful conversation, and they're listening to me and I'm listening to them, right? Because that's hard for us too, because we want to get in that lecture mode. But this is a huge, very, very broad question, but I'm sure you're going to do a great job narrowing it down. Is like, how do we be that person who's our how do we be the parent who's the go-to? How do we be the parent that doesn't bubble wrap our kids? How do we be the parent that, and your grandfather, I think, had it right, to where like your grandfather, I think, was like, you know what, I'm in this for the marathon. I'm not in this for the sprint. I'm in this for the life game, right? But I think so many parents are situational and they're reactive that it's just like, no, I've got to like, it's the thing right now. And I'm almost willing to sacrifice the connection just to get my point across. So I know that's a huge, big, broad question, but how do we find that balance?
Well, the first thing is, I think what's embedded in that question is parents want a silver bullet.
100%.
So, I do this show where we're looking for the best parenting style in America. So the point is, when parents ask me similar questions to what you just asked, and it's usually kind of wrapped like, Dr. Brown, what one book is there for parenting for my child? And I often answer it this way: find that book with your child's photo on the cover. That's the book. So what you're looking for, you already have. You have to trust yourselves. And when I say trust yourselves, it's not just about parenting. It's about who you were before you were a parent. We want to jump right. We want to jump right to the why. What is your why, my children? Your why with teachers, my students. That's not the first. It has to be I before why. So the question that all of us should ask ourselves is, who am I? That's the most important question there is. Who am I? That way you're able to assess your values, your beliefs, and mores, and other things that contribute to rearing a healthy, autonomous, independent, functioning child. So that's where I would say start. Start with you. Start with examining you. The who am I? Start with examining what you're carrying, because we're all carrying something. Start reflecting instead of reacting. When your child's talking back and raising their voice, start asking, what does it mean? And not just what does it mean from a developmental perspective, like the child doesn't have any grasp of what it means to logical thinking, but what does it mean to me? What am I feeling that's making me overreact or want to challenge the child in this situation, when I really want psychological safety to be, if there's ever going to be psychological safety, it has to be in your home. The home is the anchor. So start asking, well, was it something I missed growing up? Was it something that I experienced, or something I haven't resolved? That's kind of where I would challenge dads to be when it comes to that. And as soft and quirky as it sounds, it works. It works.
It does. And I think it's also really important too that we don't necessarily have to have all the answers sometimes. I mean, I'm sure in your journey as a dad, even all the credentials behind your name, the story I'm telling myself with 8 kids, there probably have been something that has happened, and you're probably like, you know what? I really don't know the answer to that. But I'm so glad you told me. Yeah.
More times than not, Larry. I mean, humility is a part of showing up, in your authentic self, is recognizing that you don't know everything. And as a psychologist, that's what I do. It's not who I am. I have all these multiple roles all the time, like you said earlier, that I'm juggling. But the one that is most offensive to my wife is that hat when I put on a psychologist hat in our relationship. And I learned not to do that probably year 2.
Do you know who Gary John Bishop is?
No, I've heard the name.
Yeah, he wrote, he wrote the book on F Yourself, and all, so he's the guy who's written like several books in that line. But he's from Scotland, and he says, you can either coach your wife or you can have sex with her, but you can't have both. You know what I mean? But that's so true. I'd love, as we wrap up here, I'd really love to actually transition over to marriage, because I think what a lot of parents do, and it makes total sense to us, is that we put this relationship of marriage on the back burner, for the sake of, it's all about the kids and it's nothing about us. And I really think that, so my wife and I, we've been married 20 years as of this year. And it's her belief, as it is mine, that it's my responsibility as their dad, to not only be their father, but also to show these young men what it looks like to selflessly serve, love, and appreciate and respect a woman and their mom, right? And my wife also is like, I need to show these boys what it means to selflessly serve and love and respect and appreciate my husband, because
That's right.
I don't want these knucklehead women coming into these boys' lives and treating them terrible. I want to set the bar so high of this is how you treat, your significant other. But I think a lot of us, we forget that. And so many marriages, are on the back burner. The last statistic that I read was only 12% of married couples, 12% of people who get married can actually identify their relationship as working, as fulfilling, and it's everything that they really wanted it to be. But the common denominator there is that, love is a verb. They're constantly growing together. They're constantly learning. They put their relationship as a priority. They learn skills to communicate. But I think a lot of us forget that. And I would love for you to just share how we can be better married couples in front of our kids.
Sure. And I think one thing to add to that statistic that you just mentioned, Larry, is the fact that at one time the most dangerous area was like the 7-year. They call it the 7-year itch, so to speak. Now it's 20 plus.
Really?
Yes. Check that out. Make sure. I got some of the journals back here, but make sure marriage and family. Make sure you check that out. 20 plus years. How many marriages are ending in 30 years, after 30 years, and things? Yeah.
Wow.
And I think I saw the trend happening as a university professor when I was having so many students come to my office in the major of psychology and education that were devastated because it seemed as if their parents waited till they went off to college to announce that they were divorcing. Mm-hmm. So I want to hit that question from that angle. Larry, we have to remember that we bring the children into our lives. They did not bring us into theirs. So for this to work, in my opinion, and research, backs it, is that husband and wife first, then mom and dad. Mm-hmm. And we get it so backwards. We become so, our kids today have more opportunities than not, as well as distractions. We're stretching our kids. They have soccer practice, ballet practice. Then they're going to debate team. Then they're going to forensics or whatever. So we're doing all these things to make them more well-rounded, we say. But in the process, oftentimes, we lose our intimate relationship with our spouses. That has to always be paramount. And I would tell my children growing up, she was my wife before your mom. And I say it jokingly, but there was truth in it. And they see us date. All these years, and I was just in Anchorage, Alaska, for an event. My wife flew out there to meet me. She had never been to Anchorage, so we're still dating every week. Those things, because we're constantly changing, and when people change without announcing it to their partner, you know what happens? The growth goes in different directions. Mm-hmm. So you constantly have to keep your relationship as partners, as husband, wife, whatever the dynamic is in your family, you have to keep that front and center. And it doesn't support all these quirky sayings that, we have in society. In my state of Virginia, on the license plate is kids first. In theory. That's in theory. Not even on airplanes. If you're traveling with a small child, when oxygen masks fall because of, loss of altitude, you put on yours first.
Right. And
then the child.
Right.
Because without the child, without you, guess what? Surely not going to make it. So that's it doesn't go with some of the common ideology, but I'm coming from an evidence-based, data-driven best practice where when husband and wife, or again, whatever dynamic it is that your family has, when that is first, and then the children, that has the better outcomes. Not only marriage length, but it has better outcomes with regards to overall well-roundedness of everyone.
I'm so glad you said that, and I'm so glad that this is coming from not only your experience but evidence. We put out just a short reel on Instagram, and this was months ago, and it was, I said, if you really, I think the video was, this might trigger some people, but if you want to be, if you really want to show your kids what good looks like, you're married first and you're a parent second.
Yes.
And you would have thought that, I said something that was so politically firing because there were some people that agreed, and then it was almost like people were throwing virtual tomatoes at the reel, they just completely disagreed with it. Why do you think people are so protective of that, though?
Because, first of all, the healthiest identities are multiple role identities. So listening to you here today, Larry, you got this wonderful podcast, the Dad Edge Alliance. You have your father, your husband, your martial artist. You got all these other things, and that's all I know about. You're a son, you're a brother. You got all these baskets. That's what helps us. What helps us be well differentiated. A capacity that we as humans are the only ones that have. However, what happens in this society where social media is the go-to, where comparison is the norm, people, especially children, young adults, have this one basket. Guess what happens when that one basket is threatened or crushed? They feel like their life is over.
Right.
So guess what? Parents, adults are guilty of the same. So when you think all you have going for you is being a dad, all I have going for me is being a father, guess what happens when Jordan decides to smoke weed? Oh my gosh, it's the end of the world. What am I going to do? Didn't he see the commercials? This is your brain on drugs. I mean,
the egg frying. I remember that.
But guess what? I recognize that he's going to have phases just like the rest of us. And in that phase, guess what? I'm fortunate as a dad that not all of my children go through things at the same time. But also, I'm fortunate to be a husband. I'm also fortunate to be a professional. I'm also fortunate to have so many. I'm a sister, I'm a brother, I'm a son, I'm an uncle, I'm a cousin. All of these baskets I nurture. It goes back to that juggling that you were talking about. I nurture all these baskets because at any given time that one is threatened, I recognize that's not my totality.
Right.
And that's why. And another question I would have you ask those people that wanted to throw virtual tomatoes was, if I asked you to write a list of all that you love, how long would it take you to add your name to that list? Exactly.
Yeah.
So a lot of people, they don't understand that your name has to be at the top of the list. That's called self-care. It's not selfishness. And the people that seem to be throwing these tomatoes look at what you said as, how dare you be so selfish? The children need us. And no, your name has to be at the top of the list for this to work. So it's kind of that. It just goes to show that imbalance in society. Yeah. So what happens when all I care about is being dad? And not recognizing the literature when it comes to all women need attention, and they're going to get it but they're going to get it if I don't give it to them. So Guess what? So what if I neglect my wife because I'm the world's best dad? Well, guess what? What have I done to my children? Yep. When my wife decides that she doesn't deserve the way I'm treating her. So it's a bigger picture, but some of us get so tunnel visioned. And some of us are getting our ego strength from one thing that when you say anything about that one thing, you're the worst person ever.
Yeah. I can definitely understand that. And, it's important, I think, for the kids. There have been seasons in my marriage. Actually, we're just in one right now where I was saying yes a lot for the boys. I was doing a lot with the boys. Anytime hey, can you play some video games? Hey, can you take me, to go throw the football? Hey, and I would say yes, yes, yes. And I was noticing that there was some distancing happening with me and Jess, but I didn't realize what it was. And so we sat down, we talked about it. She's like, "You're always saying yes to the boys, and you know what? I miss you too." And I was like, "Have I?" And I didn't even realize. I was like, "Have I been doing that?" She's like, "Yeah." She goes, "Think about it. Like at night, like you're doing this, you're doing that, or you're at the practice with the kids, or doing that, and like sometimes like she's like, I miss you." So like when the kids like. So now, like, I need to make sure I need those reminders. So when the kids are like, "Hey, can you?" I'm like, "No, Mom and I are going to spend some time talking tonight, and we're just going to hang out." I think that's, it's disappointing for them, but I think it's also reassuring for them because, like, they need to see that. They need to see that relationship has to be fed and it cannot be neglected.
And they also need to hear no.
Yeah, they do. They need to hear no.
They hear no at home long before they hear it in school or from a police officer or on a date.
Yeah.
And know what no means.
Agreed, 100%. The last question I have for you is around the show, the parent test. I got to tell you, watching that, I'm fascinated, I'm entertained, and I'm also insanely stressed out at the same. It's like all these emotions all at once. But the cool thing is I'm so glad you said what you did about not the silver bullet, because every single parent, in like taking clips of their experiences in their house, it's almost like. So, like, for instance, there was one family in particular where they just let their kids do, like, it was the guy with all the piercings, just let their kids do whatever, right? And there's other parents on the other extreme of, like, you cannot touch anything, the whole house is glass, right? And it's like both of those environments are just like, wow, that's extreme. And it's like I couldn't imagine either one of those, but to make your own silver bullet, it's like, okay, I can take a little bit of this freedom, and a little bit of these boundaries, and then create this. But is that, if you really look at that show, it's fascinating because you can take this advice and these experiences and take what you want from them.
But look how complex it would really be if you attempted to do that in the way that you're speaking. Every child is a study of one.
That's
every
good.
child, and I won't even say every. I'll help each child. So now we're actually seeing that child. 8 children. I have 8 different kids. So how dare one parent? How could one parenting style work for all? I mean, that's kind of a lazy brain. That I want to just say, this is what I'm going to do, and regardless of who you are as a person, you're going to fit into this style. That's what makes parenting so challenging. I tell everyone, good parenting is actually inconvenient. And they throw tomatoes at me for that. It's the most rewarding thing ever. Guess what? It is. But it's also inconvenient. It's not like television conveys it as a Hallmark commercial, that children never misbehave, that the children are always doing the right thing and bringing us joy. Guess what? You're supposed to have joy before you bring children in the world. I mean, I'm just...
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like a codependency.
Yeah.
And that's not what children... They're not miniature us. They're not mini-me's. They're a study of one. So is there a magic bullet? I don't think so. What I do think is that you learn to know who your child is and you parent accordingly. Now, guess what the challenge is? The challenge is when you have, it's not as hard with the range that you have, the 7 to 18 or 17?
Yeah, 7 to 17, yeah.
Okay, guess what? So the 7-year-old isn't going to say, how come the 17-year-old gets to stay out till 11 o'clock?
It's the opposite.
Right.
It's the feedback that I get, and it's kind of funny. I don't usually curse on this show, but I'll share this with you. So like my 15-year-old, like my 7-year-old was doing something, and you learn and evolve as a parent. And the 15-year-old was like, "Dad, what the heck, man? Like, if I would have done that at 7, you would have been blah, 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 blah." And I joke with Mason, and I'm like, yeah, but I was also an asshole then. So
Exactly. Exactly.
I mean?
Right. So that's a little, that's the hindsight. But when they're right there in the moment, and the 7-year-old is wondering why the 9-year-old has this or can do that.
Right.
And they don't necessarily have the cognitive capacity to truly understand what it is that you're doing. They have to trust you. And where does that trust come from? Years before this.
Right.
That my parents have my back. They have my best interests at heart. My parents have allowed me psychological safety to be me. So guess what? When there's not psychological safety, you know what's happened most of the time? Parents are trying to create a mold for the child to be in, as opposed to the area for that child to become who they really are.
That is so true. You know, it's fascinating that you said that about, you know, and I wrote it down. Good parenting is actually inconvenient. You know, when you try to, I've got 4, you have 8, and if you try to go at all of them the exact same way, it's going to fail. It's not going to work. I mean, even like the needs of each individual kid is so different and so diverse. And I love the fact that, like, even the picture that you said, you want to write a book, or you want to read a book on your kid, that kid needs to be on the cover.
Exactly.
But you know, I'm thinking too that book is always being written, right?
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Yes. Just like our marriages.
Right.
You know, 20 years in, you know, I'm sure you're not treating your wife the same way you treated her when you got married. Because guess what?
We'd be divorced.
So you both are evolving and transforming. Yeah. We're in a period in our marriage that has been probably the most transforming ever. During the pandemic, my wife was diagnosed with stage 2 breast cancer. Well, she's cancer-free now.
Oh, that's good. Thank God.
Exactly. But she was always kind of a carefree, loving, free-spirited. What I loved about her is, you know, the most authentic person I know, and doesn't apologize for who she is. But now, we don't necessarily plan like, oh, we're going to go here next year this time. Now she lives like, hey, let's go. So, you know, we're going to the Formula One race in Vegas in a week.
That's awesome.
You know, yeah, exactly. So there are things that we no longer have a bucket list. You know, talk about cursing. Can you imagine what list it is now? Rhymes with bucket. Exactly.
Oh. I was like, let's go do shit list.
Exactly.
But no, that's even better.
Exactly. So that's the list we have. And here I am, this methodical planning type of guy. You know, my granddad would always tell me, it's not the money you make in life, son, it's the money you keep. So I mean, he had a different mentality. So now my wife is like, you know, living, you know, with her foot on the gas pedal. And so this is new to me. It's liberating, but it's still something I've never done. Mm-hmm. You know, that's what life is about. Life is about change. You know, they say change is inevitable, but growth is optional. So when our children change, let us not be threatened by it. When our spouses change, our partners change, let us not be threatened. When we change, let us not be threatened by it and embrace it.
Man, that is so good. I'm jealous that you guys are going to the Formula One, but most
she doesn't even know what it's about, Larry. I had to watch it yesterday, and she was like, "So what's the point of this?"
Yeah, they just drive in circles. It's all good. Go fast. But, so I want to make sure I heard that last quote loud and clear, and I want to make sure that the audience did too. Is that change is inevitable, but growth is optional?
Correct.
Isn't that awakening?
Oh yeah, change is going to happen. Our children get older. Let me tell you something. People think parenting in the young years are interesting. Wait till you have young adults.
Mm-hmm. I can only imagine.
You said something earlier that just cracked me up. You said you want to make sure your boys don't go out here and find knuckleheads. So I got to say this, that you're going to have grace in who they find.
Yes. We're, you know, we've been down this path a little bit, you know, but the knuckleheads haven't really shown up in the female version. It's been more like their friends, like, and some of them are just like, you look at them and you know what they're doing, you know what they're saying, and you're just like, oh boy, you know, it's like you just try to guide them the best way you can.
That's right.
We look at it as like I always tell, if I share something with my boys, you know, like I'll share this with you. My son yesterday, it was kind of like one of those off days where like my son had plans with all of his friends the night before, and then they all canceled, and he kind of woke up the next day. The weather wasn't all that great. There wasn't a whole lot for him to do. And he just kind of was like, I feel kind of blue. I feel sort of depressed, And it's right around Halloween as you and I are recording this, and he wanted to watch the movie The Conjuring. And I'm one of those guys, I don't like scary movies, number one. But number two, I'm one of those people, we're a faith-based family, and like I'm like, hey, you need to be very vigilant about what you allow in, that kind of thing. And so I shared with him, I said, he's like, hey, do you mind if I rent The Conjuring and watch it in my room? And he texted me that from downstairs. I went downstairs. I said, hey, I got your text. I said, listen, you're almost 18 years old, and you're going to be making your own choices without me around. I was like, but can I share something with you as a guide, as a friend? And I'm not saying this as a lecture. I'm saying this as someone who's ahead of you and who knows a thing or two, but I'm not lecturing you. Is that okay? He's like, yeah. And I said, I understand you're going through a pretty rough day. And I said, we always got to be very vigilant about the things we allow in, right? But especially with the things that we allowed in when we're in a more vulnerable state. So if you're feeling down, you're feeling depressed, you even got to be more vigilant about the things that you allow in, even if it feels like, oh, it's Halloween time and it's a good idea and it's all this other stuff. And I was just like, and you just got to make a decision based around, is this something that's going to move me forward, or is it going to put me in a deeper spot? And even if you're at the surface of like, no, I'll be fine, but will you? Because those little things, they just kind of get in there.
But you know
and
what?
And I just let him make his own decision. And here's what he did. He decided to watch it. So the next day we got up this morning, we worked out together. I was like, so what'd you decide? He goes, I decided to watch it. I'm like, okay. I was like, well, how do you feel? He's like, I feel okay. I was like, do you feel, I said, I'm just curious. I was like, do you feel better than what you did last night? He's like, not really. I was like, any takeaways? He goes, he kind of like thought about it. And he goes, it didn't help anything. You were right. He's like, it didn't make me feel worse, but it sure didn't help anything. I'm like, okay. I was like, it's just something to be cognizant of as you get older. And then I said, I'm going to do something, and I want you to just watch it. So we drove 10 minutes to the gym, and I put on talk radio, right? All the craziness. It's like the end of the world. I was like, we got to the gym. I was like, did you hear anything on the radio? He's like, yeah. I go, what'd you hear? He's like, oh man, like there's just like some doom and gloom. I said, yeah, there is. I was like, have you ever heard me listen to this before? He's like, not really. I was like, it's because I'm very cognizant about what I put in. I was like, how pumped up do you feel to go work out in the gym right now? He's like, I don't at all. I was like, me neither. I was like, so that's what I mean. You just got to be careful.
But see, the fact that you are where your feet are. You are a present dad, and
thanks.
With all the things that distract our children, those same things can distract us. So the fact that you told him, as opposed to telling your wife or thinking it for yourself, you told him. But then you didn't just tell him. Then you queried, hey, what happened? And then you gave him another example. That's why I love PE teachers so much. PE teachers back in the day would tell you what to do, show you what to do, then have you demonstrate it. And if you didn't do it correctly, they'd do it again.
So true. Wow.
Yeah, back in the day.
That's why we liked it so much.
Exactly. Exactly. Very small room to fail. So, I tell you what I did with my children, very similar, and I did it at a young age. I used to tell them, if this were a war between two countries, the enemy is going to try to destroy the other country's headquarters. And then I have them touch your headquarters, and they all go like this. I said, you got to protect your headquarters all the time. All the time. Now, my granddad used to tell me a little differently. He didn't say, and he used to crack me up. I laughed about it because all of his stories came from a book he called The Love Story. And in the love story, he told me I needed to have a helmet, a breastplate, a sword, a certain type of belt and shoes as my protection. And, the spiritual warfare.
Right.
And, exactly. And he called the Bible the love story. And he never ever said the Bible. He said, well, this is from the love story, son. And that's how I view that book. That's how my children have viewed reading that book, The Love Story. Again, 3rd grade farm school education.
Wow. Wow, man. Like when you said that and you were going through it, I was like, well, that sounds like Ephesians. I was like, there's another book out there called The Love Story.
That's
But
right.
no, that's good. I like that,
But
man.
that's what he called it. And you know,
Wow.
he told me that in his absence, that a lot of the things that I would go through, I could find in there. I could find help, and didn't push it on me, but just told me stories. And the stories that he told me were some of the I thought were some of the worst people I could ever meet. If I ever met they're just like horrible. But it also helped me see that I'm also human and I'm also broken. So in the spirit of fatherhood, I want every father to know, coming from my lips, there's no such thing as being 100. There's no such thing in anything. When we started broken, okay, that's how the light gets in. But there's no such thing as being 100, like perfect. And I'm not even saying that perfection is the goal, but being 100 and just being, it's all about being your best at the time. Because guess what? Your best with your 17-year-old might be different when he's 22. Might be different when he's 30. Of course it's going to be different. Guess what? Because sometimes they're going to want to do it without you. But you still got to be there. So
Yep.
look, yeah. We should talk again when your children are older.
I know, right? We're rescheduling another podcast every 5 years, just so you guys know. Man, Doc Brown, this has been so awesome. Thanks for coming on and sharing. I mean, I feel like to be honest, I got to talk to you all day. This is so
Likewise.
cool. And
I feel the connection. I did
Same.
not know, and I researched some things, and I loved your conversational style, but I didn't realize that we had very similar backpacks.
it's crazy, isn't it? Like when
Yeah.
you started talking and some of the homework I did on you, I was like, wow, this is crazy. But this has just been a very enjoyable conversation. I know the audience has gotten a ton out of it. I want to make sure that the audience can find you. You have books out there, your show out there, the Parent Test. But I want to make sure that the men know. And I also want to give you an opportunity here to share with us what's coming. What do you
Okay.
got going on maybe in the next year or so?
Gotcha. So you can find me at Doc Speaks, like the doctor speaks, docspeaks.com. And of course, I love doing the Parent Test. We're kind of on hiatus based on what's going on with the industry.
Right.
And also what's in the works is the Doc Brown Show.
No way. Are you serious?
Yeah.
Congrats, man. That's awesome.
For daytime. So again,
Yes.
that just depends on kind of what happens with the industry, but that was put into effect prior to the things that are happening right now. And
So cool.
and I think it's a wonderful time. These are things that came along when my children were younger, but it just wasn't a good fit.
Right.
When I tell dads that, there's no such thing as being 100, I'm not the dad that made every single baseball game. But my philosophy was, I'm not going to miss them all. So I'm that dad. I'm that dad, that imperfect, broken dad that's always trying to do my best for my children and for my family.
We're in good company with each other, man. That is for sure. Well, guys, not to worry. We're going to have all the links in the show notes for you. Head on over to thedadedge.com/Friday133 for this show. Again, thedadedge.com/133 for this show. I'm sorry, thedadedge.com/Friday133 for this show. Doc Brown, well, first of all, thank you for the show and congratulations on your upcoming venture. And I can't wait to see that. I'm already going to be one of your #1 fans watching that. So I appreciate the work you're doing, man.
Hopefully you'll be a guest.
Oh, I would love to. That would be amazing, man. That would be amazing.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I appreciate you.
Appreciate you back.